Had them online before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. Had them online before I dial up. How they claiming they on top when I'm a mile up. I know the wall's closing in, but don't you dare give up now. Poe believed in me, pull up, threw some bucks down. Todd told the valet, pull the truck round. Push the line after we drew it, it's just us now. Would you believe me if I told you my granny told me she prayed this? Then booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, you're too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for they prohibit.
When I grew up in Harlem in the 40s and 50s, I never heard a gunshot.
Well, let me read what you say in your preface. You say, let me state here, and now that these essays do not mean, 1, all Southern whites were or are rednecks, 2, all black Americans today or in the past were or are black rednecks. One cannot predict, you write, much less forestall all the clever misinterpretations that others might put on one's words. The most that can be done is to alert honest people to the problem. Black rednecks, who are they?
These would be blacks who came out of the Southern culture and who carried that culture with them north into the urban ghettos and into the ghettos of the South for that matter, and who have not moved out of that culture since. Over the years, both blacks and whites have moved away from that culture. But in the poorest and worst of the ghetto areas, there are lots of people who have not. And these kinds of, it's a culture which didn't do whites any good, and it's certainly not doing blacks any good today. And the tragedy is that people regard this culture as somehow the authentic black culture, and therefore you're not to interfere with it.
Quick example. When I grew up in Harlem in the 40s and 50s, I never heard a gunshot. Now, I'm sure someone fired a gun somewhere in Harlem, but it was not such a pervasive thing that you had to hear it. You know, I have relatives in Washington. I asked them the same question, people in my generation.
Growing up in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and low-income black neighborhoods. Did you ever hear a gunshot when you were growing up? And the answer was no. I have relatives in North Carolina. I asked the same question. No. And now, you know, people in housing projects especially, they put kids, some of them, to bed in bathtubs so that they won't be hit by stray bullets in the night. Now we take it for granted that there's crimes, tremendous levels of crime and violence in the black community. That was not.
Massive structures rely mostly on a scaled portion of tenant wages, and the bottom would soon fall out of urban industrialization and the funds to operate public housing, much like the jobs that had lured millions from the South, would all disappear too.
This building is through. I'm 33 years old. I've been here 33 years. The heating systems, it's not working.
Girl, this don't make no sense. They should at least have some heat.
Y'all seen the floods in the building, the water, the pipes, them busted and everything like that.
When I moved into public housing, there was rigorous background checks. There were social workers who checked in on you. They no longer did any of that. They simply took people, threw them in. They said, if you want to live in public housing, come on, go in there.
The quality of life was hell on earth. You might go to sleep and it might be roaches crawling from up under your pillow. You may get on the elevator and the elevator smell like urine. You may be outside playing basketball, hooping, and somebody that you just passed the ball to might get shot in the head. I lost a good friend of mine. He was out just shooting jumpers and they came through and shot him 19 times, automatic.
The police always used to say they don't go into Cabrini until the shooting stops. You hear a lot of residents say they feared for their life because of the lack of protection.
Planners made a choice to build housing for large families, families with 5, 6, 7 children.
Originally, there were 7 persons to every unit. When you couple that with female-headed families and average incomes of $5,000,
they didn't think about how many kids they were putting in a building versus the number of adults.
People who were concerned about their children playing were up 16 floors, while their children were 16 floors away. All of a sudden, the children are now creating their own rules for living without the connection to their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their grandparents. If you could imagine a 16-story building pouring out children, and then the children deciding what they wanted to do, what was good, whether or not they wanted to fight, whether or not they wanted to steal.
You have to put all of this shift in public housing at the feet of public policy.
The government would not pay for a child who had a father living with that child.
Fathers of some children in this building found their families could be helped by the welfare department, but only if they left home or died.
The father leaves, all of a sudden the rent drops. Hey, that's a pretty good deal. It became a financial incentive for the father to move out.
My father could not live with us, and we had social workers come to our homes to find out if there were men's clothes or if we had a new television.
Jane, this is Miss Stewart.
Glad to know you, Mrs. Stewart. How are you?
I'm here to help you find a place to move.
What would happen then is that you've got a lot of children now without adult supervision from men.
And the dropout rate in the schools began to increase dramatically. Many of the boys were put out of school and they were in the streets. They terrorized the communities, this community and others.
Across America, public housing is in ruins, called a national disgrace.
Cabrini Green. To some folks, it has become a hell on earth.
Life at Robert Taylor is dominated by welfare, women, and children.
Uh-oh, how do I stop sharing this thing now? Uh-oh.
Hey.
All right, folks. I know that made you anxious. I hope it did. We hope it did, because we had to have a conversation about this. This is Jackie Luqman.
And Uncle Baba.
And welcome to another episode of Luqman Nation and Black Power Media.
Still the most dangerous show on social media.
Still.
On the most dangerous platform on social media. So, look, welcome everybody out there to our dope night.
Mm-hmm.
And look.
Date night.
Well, Dope Fridays. Date night on Dope Friday. That's what it is.
It is not dope night.
It's Dope Fridays. Date night on Dope Fridays. That's what it is. Yep. All right, I got it. Rewind, right? But anyway, as you see, look, we'd like to welcome you to Date Night on our Dope Friday.
There we go.
And we understand that this is really not the traditional opening that a lot of people are used to, with from our stream of Black Power Media stream. But we was trying to build this narrative, to confront a narrative that is being promoted out there. And I think some of you have kind of figured out where we was going with this. First of all, what I like to do is welcome the new member that we have.
We've got a new member already.
Yeah, we had a new member when we right before we came on, and it's a name that I really need to look at to pronounce.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, here it is.
Oh,
Zarek Tabuk.
All
is
right.
the new member.
There we go.
Right. And
Welcome.
I pray that I'm not messing up the name, but we welcome you as a member of Black Power Media, and we welcome all of you, David Silberg, Ricky Ryan, Jadorian, Bukiki, Karina, all you guys, Lisa Catlett, Shirley, James Thompson, my man. So JAB himself, Jared Ball, who, believe it or not, I reached out to be a part of this show. So because we were really looking forward to Jared's input on this time of soul, because we were actually, this is just something that we didn't just pull out the hat. This was something that we was chopping up for a while, Jackie, right?
Yeah, I mean, and kind of events sort of took over, with the way life goes. So we've been kind of planning this show for a minute, and okay, look, just full disclosure, full disclosure.
Full disclosure.
We are not at all endorsing a damn thing Thomas Sowell says.
Not at all.
Not at all. But there's a reason we started with his comments, especially about Black culture and where he thinks this Black culture, particularly in poor Black neighborhoods and the projects, comes from. And he actually crafted this ridiculous idea of Black rednecks.
Right.
That poor Black people in the projects, they haven't let go of their redneck culture from the South.
Right.
And so we started with that because this is the kind of stuff that Jared pointed out earlier that white media understands they can use against Black people. Because, see, Thomas Sowell doesn't have an audience among Black folks.
Right.
I mean, we've got 61 people watching. How many of y'all do know who this guy is? How many of you know he's actually still alive? If you know
like
who
in his 90s.
he is.
He's like in his 90s now.
Yeah, and I thought that he was still like making videos. Well,
Right.
thank God he isn't. But somebody is putting together these clips of all of his interviews from, throughout his career and still propagating them on YouTube. And this particular video of his, a compilation of his interviews, has over like 1.7 million views on YouTube. And it was uploaded a few months ago.
Right. And not just the 7 million views, the fact that one particular video had spun off other YouTube videos by other YouTubers who bought into this, Black people who have bought into this narrative that it is Black culture, that Black culture is the reason why we seem to always be at the bottom, why we seem to not get ourselves together. That one clip, and that's why we showed that clip in the length that we did, because it's not just that several million people have viewed this. It's that other Black YouTubers have basically seized on this. And if you ever watch, as I had, I had the unfortunate thing to do when we was preparing for the show. The comments, Jackie. The comments. It's like Candace Owens, right? Who we're gonna get into later on in the show. But oh my God, Thomas Sowell, he's Black people need to listen to him. Oh my God, what a smart man. It's a shame that Black people rather listen to Cardi B as opposed to listen to something, the whole garbage type stuff. And so I remember bringing this to your attention when I first saw this clip, and I was just so mad. And, and it was like, wow, man, we really need to discuss this on Black Power Media, because it's like, believe it or not, these people have an audience. It might not be us,
right?
But it's after having Dr. Ron Frazier on the cipher the other day, and what we were discussing there, and seeing how part of that show was about confronting narratives,
right?
So one of the questions I asked Dr. Frazier was, what about in the age of social media? In the age of social media, is it even more important for us to confront these narratives now, seeing that the message gets out there faster.
Right.
And
yeah.
and that it has a wider effect, broader effect. So, so this is where we come with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, and like I said, we, meaning, Baba and I, have been tossing this thing around. And I just have to be honest about how we roll. Abdus is the one who watches all of the conservative media. He does it because I don't have the stomach for it. He does it. He will sit there and, watch these videos and listen to what these people say. I should be more, attuned to it, I suppose, for journalistic reasons. But there's only so much of that stuff you can take. But I salute you.
Somebody got to do it.
Salute you, Baba.
Somebody got to take out the trash.
That's exactly what he does.
Somebody has to take out the trash.
So before we get into the rest of the meat of this conversation, look, let's remind you that if you're not a member of Black Power Media, you can join Black Power Media. The join button is right next to the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, you should subscribe.
Hit that bell too.
Hit the like button. If you have not hit the like button yet, hit the like button so we can, do whatever we need to do with the algorithms and all that kind of stuff. And we did hit our 170 patron subscribers goal.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
But you should still become a patron of Black Power Media. You can find us on patreon.com, Black Power Media.
Yeah, hit the notification bell too. So, and I think what's really cool about Black Power Media is like when you go on and they, you have to set reminders and stuff. So, I mean, those notifications are cool because I know for myself, when Jackie and I aren't broadcasting on Black Power Media, I get a chance to check out, I Mix What I Like. I get a chance to check out, other podcasts, So, I mean, it's, we got just such great content. And then we just finished the second week of the Remix Morning Show, which we are having a ball doing. I mean, look, I keep my ear to the ground. I really do. And I mean, the Remix Morning Show is buzzing out there, y'all. I'm serious. It's buzzing. I mean, I'm getting messages, man, from people who I didn't even think was checking us out saying, yo, y'all got something good right on there. So big ups to you guys for supporting us, and big ups to the Black Power Media staff, crew, and creators.
All that good stuff.
All that good stuff.
Now let's talk about this foolishness from the Black agents of white supremacy, because that's who people like Thomas Sowell and Candace Owens, and somebody mentioned Shelby Steele, and now Tim Scott. Can we add Tim Scott?
Yeah,
we can add him. And since we're going to add Tim Scott, can we add Kamala Harris for real now?
Of course.
Finally, can y'all see that if we know that our Black Power Media family did not think that Kamala Harris was worth anything. We know, but for those of you out there who might be watching this at a later time, Kamala Harris agreed with Tim Scott that America's not a racist nation. And I don't know what else y'all need, honestly. I just, okay. But these are Black people who are the agents of white supremacy, because the politicians and the white media, as Jared said earlier in a comment, they know they can trot these people out to give these kinds of narratives about Black people, and particularly about poor Black people.
About poor Black people, yes.
Because this is not just a race issue and an issue of white supremacy.
This is definitely class.
Is also a class issue,
class.
and this is why so many Black people commented on, like you said, Sowell's video, because we don't like to confront our own little class hatred. But the same information, or the same avenue for information that people will go and get their class biases confirmed. See, they won't go to YouTube and find the other video that we followed up with. That's why we followed up with that video, because see, Thomas Sowell and the Candace Owens and all these Black folks who are always talking about Black culture, this, that, and the third, and it's hip hop, and it's rap, and it's gangster culture, and it's,
America's there. They spin these narratives like, oh, America's there for the taking if you just take advantage of it, and it's because of Black culture that this is what just real quickly, Jackie. What really is what bothers me so much about this like the Thomas Sowells and all of these so-called intellectuals or academias, that's on, that run these narratives, they always hide behind data.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, they always hide behind data.
They always claim that they're, talking about, well, the data shows, and I love how they always bring out like the FBI statistics on crime. Right. They always sort of look at how many people, black people, murder. But okay, really quickly, those FBI statistics on crime rates, first of all, they are based on arrest records. They're not based on convictions. They're based on clearance rates from police department arrest records. That is it. They are not based on convictions. So we don't even know if those people have been convicted of any crime.
Right.
Second, they always point to like the statistics for murder among black people, but they don't point out the fact that white people kill just as many people as white people.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they always leave that. So their reliance on data, the conservatives in general.
Well, how about how about the data called the history books?
How about that?
Yeah, right.
There's that.
Yeah,
I mean, so their reliance on this data, and people get so intimidated when they bring out these statistics, and they're like, well, the numbers don't lie. I don't have anything to say. Yes, you do. They are lying. They're lying by omission. And you have to understand that they do this because they know so few of us like to dig into the information, to this so-called data, and catch them in their lies. So that's an easy way to do it. When they bring up, these crime statistics and look at how much crime black people commit. No, that's how many people have been arrested.
Right.
That's not a conviction rate. And with the criminal justice system in this country, the conviction rate doesn't mean anything either.
Well, I'll give you one example taken from the video that we just looked at.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take this one example, which I'm not an academic, but I think I could kind of deal with this one. He says, I never heard a gunshot when I was growing up in Harlem. It was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in Harlem, I never heard a gunshot. Well, I was in Camden, New Jersey as a kid, and I rarely heard gunshots too.
Mm-hmm.
But guess what's the difference between then and now? Because he makes the comparison that, I don't remember hearing a gunshot. But look at the day. We just take it for granted that you go to certain areas and it's violent and you hear guns all the time. Well, I like when you said that there is this thing of omission.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, which wind up becoming one of the most dangerous cities in America, but not yet. See, when I was growing up in Camden, New Jersey, I too only heard one gunshot in the time that from the time before I went to middle school. But let's look at what is omitted, and that's why we showed the other thing. Is what was omitted is that in Camden at the time when I heard that one gunshot, there was plenty of jobs.
Right.
The manufacturing base in Camden, not what it used to be, but it was still viable enough to employ a large segment of the population, including my father and my uncles and them, in factories that was within walking distance from my house.
Right.
Number two, black men weren't forced out their homes. Right. So when my father and them came from the service, my dad served in the Army during the 60s, during the Vietnam era. When he came home from the service and other black men came home in service, and I remember that vividly because I remember as a kid seeing a whole bunch of men walking around with army jackets on. Didn't know what it was, and I asked my mother why everybody got these jackets on. She said, well, they just come home from the war. So, but there were men still, a lot of men that were still in the home, right? So men weren't forced out of the home. You didn't have this rampant manufacturing, as we know, was diminishing. But like I said, it was still viable enough to employ a lot of people still had jobs. And we didn't have crack. We didn't. I mean, the CIA didn't flood our communities with crack.
Not yet.
Not yet.
It hadn't gotten here.
Right.
Yet.
The government we still had summer job programs.
Right.
We still had that. Kids that were older than myself were still able to during the summertime get a job that was sponsored by the federal government. So that kept a lot of kids off the street. We had the police athletic league. Where we could go and learn how to box. This was all in my city, which wound up becoming the most dangerous city in America. Not yet. So what happened is that we had the police athletic league. We also had after school programs that when we left school, a lot of us was able to go home, change out of our school clothes. Those of you old enough know what I'm talking about. We would go home, change out of our school clothes, get into our play clothes, and guess what? Go back to school because the gyms and stuff were open for after hours. So, yeah, Thomas Sowell. Yeah, we didn't hear gunshots either. You know why? Because the situation has not gotten quite that desperate where in a lot of places where we live.
I mean, I fondly, David, you're right. I do give that look when, where you were and where you were, it was called a different thing. Here it was just called the Summer Jobs Program.
Right.
In New Jersey,
it was called CETA.
Right, it was called CETA. It was a part of that program. But I remember that program fondly because everybody had a job. If you wanted to work, you had a job.
Right.
And that's actually how a lot of kids transitioned from high school right into white collar jobs, if you want to call it that, into a lot of these businesses and lobbying firms or whatever in Washington D.C. Right from high school, because they worked at these places during the summer because of the federal summer jobs program. Now, the point you made about fathers being forced out of the homes. That's why I really want to spend a lot of this discussion on, because a lot of times these people like the Sowells and the Candace Owens and they always talk about there are no black men around and black fathers don't be around, as if there was like this group decision by black men to be like, let's all just leave. We're all just going to leave on May 1st, 1964. And we're just going to leave. And we're just not going to go anywhere. And we're just not going to have any contact with our families. We're just going to leave. When we're talking about housing projects in particular, public housing in particular, poor black neighborhoods, it's not that black men did not want to be there. You heard in the video we shared, and the documentary that video comes from is called, and I put it in the chat a little bit earlier. I think it's called "What Happened in Chicago." It is an incredible video. Well, part of the thing that happened in Chicago and that happened in public housing across this country in every major city was that the government decided that it would be a financial incentive for fathers not to be in the homes. Now, you heard the kind of progression. They built these, especially in Chicago. We didn't have those kind of high-rise public housing projects all over the place here, but we did have, projects. They were kind of sprawled out, only because DC had a height restriction for buildings for a long time. But we did have, public housing. So,
in fact, DC, believe it or not, DC was the first area that public housing began.
Right.
Yeah, before it did spread out. So DC was ground zero for public housing.
It absolutely was. So there was a decision by policymakers in regard to public housing to make small apartments for large families. But the families could not include men.
You couldn't include men. Everybody remember Claudine.
And Ricky Ryan mentioned that movie a little bit earlier in the chat. That was one of my favorite movies. I think that's one of your favorite movies.
Definitely one of my favorite movies.
And there's a part in this documentary where a little bit further, if you do watch it, and we encourage you to watch it. Is this camera really going to act up again right now? Yes, I think it is. Let's see what's going on.
So anyway.
Yeah, so there was a part in the documentary that there's a social worker who goes to one of the men in the family and says, we're going to help you find a place to live. And, I just really think that's garbage because, number one, he already has a place to live. Why are you kicking that man out of his home, away from his woman, away from his children? That's the first issue. Second, did these people really find our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, places to live? I don't believe they did. I don't buy it, because I really don't see where there was a place in the country where a whole lot of black men were living all together,
right,
that the social workers found for them. I just don't see it. So I'm looking at this. Oh, here we go. It's not the greatest picture, y'all, but here we are. We have returned. Here we go. Technology be messing us up, but it ain't gonna stop us.
It's about the message.
It's about the message. So anyway, this idea that the same social workers who kicked black men who were living in government housing, subsidized housing, the projects, out of their homes. These were these men's homes. And they claim, well, we're going to find you a place to live. Where they go?
Well, another thing too, I think is important to mention, is that they promised to reduce the rent if the man left.
They made it a financial
incentive. The rent was actually reduced when the man left. And before, when I saw Claudine, I remember years ago when my grandmother was living, and I remember asking my grandmother about that. And my grandmother said, yeah, she said that was true. My grandmother, who was on welfare at one time, she said she said they were so intrusive, the welfare people, that you only could have a black phone. You couldn't have a phone other than black. They would go through your house, look for men's clothes. She said that her social worker, welfare worker, used to look under the bed, used to look in the bathroom, pull the shower curtains to see if a man was hiding in there, look at the appliances, and if it was an appliance, just like Claudine, if there was something in that kitchen or in that house that wasn't there when she was there last time, my grandmother had to have a receipt to show that she bought this. And if she bought it, if someone gave it to her as a gift, they would deduct it from her welfare.
That's right.
Stipend. So this type of liberalism, because these people, this was supposed to be the war on poverty,
right?
Right. This was supposed to be in the war on poverty, and all it did was, again, like you said, broke up these families, forced men out of the homes, and wind up making poverty even worse.
Exactly. And let's be clear. This happened at a time when manufacturing began to decline precipitously across the country in every major city. Those manufacturing jobs kind of pushed out to the suburbs, but eventually they left the suburbs too.
They left the country.
But they left the country. But they left the cities first. And where did black people, after Jim Crow, and where did black people go mostly? To the major cities.
Right.
So you can't tell me that when people like Sowell and Owens and other folks like them, the black faces of, and can we be real honest? Barack Obama.
Well, yeah. Well, this is one of the things that I think we really need to be honest about.
Come on,
Thomas Sowell, the Barack Obamas, and they are actually the evil spawn of the civil rights movement.
What do you mean?
They are, they are the evil spawn of the civil rights movement, because what happened is, we know that the civil rights movement basically opened the doors for down south. It was a middle class black movement.
Yeah.
And we understand that a lot of the gains and stuff that came, through the civil rights, basically it was a middle class advancement. The poor black people in the cities didn't gain much from the civil rights movement. What opened the doors with this integration was mainly beneficial to the black middle class. So you're looking at like the Barack Obamas and all them, and of that ilk, and Kamala Harris, I guess, in some sense, you're looking at the children of the civil rights the black middle class civil rights generation that got theirs.
Yeah.
If you want to take DC, got theirs. Used the excuse that white folks used and got out of the cities because, oh God, the poor blacks are rioting, and got out of these cities, moved out to the suburbs, and were willing to pay more than the white folks to move out there. And then what happened is that now they've overcame, and so it was all about forgetting about the systemic racism that was being fought throughout the country. Now it was all about a meritocracy, a false sense of instilling in their kids that respectable politics, meritocracy, and getting far away from poor black people as you can. To basically what their goal was is to integrate. You know what I mean? So even today, the black masses have not really benefited from as we see from the civil rights. And so when you look at Thomas Sowell and a lot of those, that's why I call them the evil spawn of the civil rights movement, because it was the poor black people that got that kicked the door open because they was afraid of this. They seen their cities burning down.
Yeah,
you didn't have middle class blacks burning down cities.
That's true.
These was from the project. These were the people that was in the hood. That was the foot soldiers, if you want to say that for lack of a better term. That was basically putting fear, right, underneath a lot of these seats of government, and like, yo, look, I'm never going to forget that iconic picture of all these fires burning around the Capitol building back in 1968 after Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Now, and Nixon, and this was reported that Richard Nixon looked out and seen them fires and said to Kissinger, he said, "They're coming after us. Put these buses and stuff around the White House." He said, "They're coming after us." It was straight fear.
Yep.
So but those who put the fear in the government and stuff are the same ones that's being blamed for everything now, even though they were the ones who didn't benefit from all of the benefits that a lot of the middle class blacks got from the gatekeepers, the one that we talk about right now.
That was so good that got us a new member. Look at that. Bashi Rose, thank you for becoming a new member. We appreciate you and
Bashi
welcome.
Rose, yeah, welcome.
So, I love that you said that you laid that out the way you did, because we always talk about, how the class war must be brutal.
Right.
And it's got to be brutal among our people too. Let's not have any illusions that we have to be any nicer to our folks who have a class hatred, because we don't.
Right.
The class war must be brutal among our people, and we've got to call out these folks like the Sowells and the Candace Owens and the Shelby Steeles and that guy who is on Fox News all the time.
Oh, Leo Terrell, who is actually the attorney, the one that said that, I don't even want to get into it, but he made the rounds on social media recently because of the Chauvin verdict. And he was saying how George Floyd's murder was not the result of racism. But he actually gets the Uncle Ruckus Award for for
he
April.
does. But then I'm thinking of this other older black guy who, whenever he's on Fox News, they always call him a civil rights activist. Always. I can't remember his name, but when you see them do stuff like these conservative news outlets, and they have these kind of black folks on there and they identify them as a civil rights activist, remember two things. What he just said about the class character of the civil rights movement, too many folks in the civil rights movement, not all, but also the way white media uses the middle class folks in the civil rights movement against poor black people, not just now, but remember that they use those people in the civil rights movement that they hated back then against the Black Power movement that grew out of the same projects in the cities that you talk about.
Exactly.
So this is where we are. So when these people are used by these folks to talk about where are all the fathers at, there are no black men in the neighborhoods, and then they throw out all these statistics. They never talk about how it was government policy that literally separated fathers from their families. And, look, I understand that men didn't just disappear into thin air,
right?
Right. But I also remember my aunt. She had an apartment. She came up here from Jarrett, Virginia with her son, was on public assistance for a while. My Uncle Junie was always around, but he couldn't stay.
Right.
He couldn't stay. Uncle Junie, the social worker, when they were still making the rounds, the social worker would show up unannounced.
Yep. That's what my grandmother said.
But let me tell you something. We had a network in the neighborhood where when people saw the social worker coming, they would run to the back of the apartment building and, shout up at the window or throw rocks up at the window and say, hey, so-and-so is coming. And at the time, we didn't have a back door in that apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So Uncle Junie had to scoot across the hall in somebody else's apartment.
Right.
And you couldn't have anything new. You couldn't have a new appliance.
Nope, you couldn't. No.
You heard the lady say that, and you heard it. The lady say in the video clip that you couldn't have a new TV.
Right.
These people would come into our homes and literally look at everything that was in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was new, then they asked you where you got it from. They knew you couldn't afford it because you were on public assistance.
And they knew how much you was getting.
They knew how much you were getting.
Yeah.
So they knew that a man got it for you. So they cut your benefits.
Yeah, they sure did.
And if a man was in the home, then they, like we said earlier, then they said, well, if he leaves, we'll reduce your rent.
Another thing I wanted to mention about the men too, because there's another thing that we've mentioned on our show. Jared Ball has mentioned on the show and others. But one of the distinctions that is often not applied to when we talk about poverty in this country is the way that it was dealt with by the government. Now, you had plenty of white men during the Depression abandon their families.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, plenty. I mean, that's where the term hobo came from.
Really?
The term hobo came from white men leaving their families, jumping on the trains, and just leave either looking for work. But either way, they jumped on the railroad lines and wind up going to different parts of the country, in search of work or wherever they were going. But they abandoned their families, because it was this thing that, well, look, I'm, a woman with kids could get more than if I was with them.
Right.
So you had a lot of men. You had a lot of men, and this is where hobo came from. If anybody remember the hobo image of the man with the stick and the sack, that came from the Depression when white men were abandoning their families in droves. But look at the difference, though. The difference is that the government responded to that through the New Deal.
Right.
And what did the government did? They created large infrastructure construction projects and stuff to employ these millions of white men who abandoned their families in order. That's where you had the Tennessee Authority.
Right.
You had the Hoover Dam. You had all of these great infrastructure projects that was created during the time of the so-called New Deal. You had the CCC and all of these things. I mean, they was even putting white writers to work for the Federal Writers Project. So this is how the government responded to when white folks was experiencing rampant poverty. So now all of a sudden so we have this thing here where you had the economic situation of the Great Depression that was forcing white men to leave the homes. But now the same government that was creating programs to bring these white men back and to stabilize them and eventually return them to their families are the same government that was pushing black men out.
Exactly. And I'm so you brought up the New Deal.
Yeah.
And there are black academics who argue today that the New Deal wasn't racist. And it's true that the federal legislation was not written to exclude black people. There's nothing in the legislation that says black people can't participate in these programs. What happened was the federal government made a deal with the states that they could administer the New Deal programs however the heck they wanted to.
Right.
Otherwise, the senators weren't going to pass it. They weren't going to vote for it unless they had control over how the federal programs were administered. What did they use? The states' rights argument.
Of course.
That's what they used.
With the intentions of excluding black people.
And that's what happened. So when people and you know what, forgive me, y'all, if you have a lot of, if you feel a certain way about it, but I'm just going to say it. When people like Adolph Reed Jr., who I generally have a pretty good amount of respect for, when he says things like the New Deal wasn't racist, that is historically disingenuous. And I feel kind of bad saying it, But it's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. You can't tell me that you see historically, just from the historical record, the disproportionate impact, or I should say, we should say the disproportionate benefit of the New Deal,
right?
When it came to white men and black men. And okay, fine, the federal government, Roosevelt didn't say black people are excluded, but those governors who took the money and implemented the programs did. And guess what? Roosevelt knew they were going to do it. He knew it. So yes, the New Deal did benefit black people in some way, to where they wouldn't have, gotten some of those benefits before. But though under all of those New Deal programs where black men got jobs, they were still paid less than white men.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Fewer jobs went to black men than went to white men.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that there was a disproportionate benefit for black people from the New Deal compared to white people. So look, people, I don't care how academically astute they are, when they say that the New Deal wasn't racist, that's historically untrue. It just isn't. I understand that that's saying something different from saying that Teddy Roosevelt,
right?
Or which one was it? Franklin Roosevelt, because Teddy Roosevelt was a fucking racist.
Right.
But Franklin Roosevelt, that's a different thing. And I feel like that's what people are mad at. Like people are saying, you're trying to say Franklin Roosevelt was racist. Well, first of all, yeah. But second, that's not what we're saying.
Right.
Well, we're not saying that the legislation was written to be racist, but the legislation was absolutely racist in the way it was implemented.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's without a doubt that, that in order, the way that this government is set up, that the Southern Dixiecrats wielded a lot of power. The filibuster and all this other kind of stuff that we still hear about now. So I mean, it's no question that this was set in order to do what they've always done in this country, even back to the Homesteader Act and all this stuff, was making sure that white people were good. You know what I mean? So they gave free land and slaves. Exactly. I mean, come on. So they were just doing what they've always done. So so it's just that that these and you set it off, hon, when you said about omission, because see, this is the ahistorical analysis that is often thrown out there without any of the silverware, the glass and all of the other stuff that come by. Now let's move this forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Because because Sowell indicted black culture. And I want to make one thing clear. Something that I feel is something that is quite noticeable with the Candace Owens and all of these other Walter Williams and all these other people who think that they have danced their way out of being black and the black experience, is that and this goes back to what Jared's point was earlier, is about white media. White media could give two fucks about their opinion on anything else.
Yep.
Nobody brings Candace Owens on any news program to talk about what's happening with Russia and China.
Nope. Anybody ask her about Afghanistan?
Nobody brings her self-hating ass on any program to talk about, well, so Candace, so what do you think about what's happening in Chad? And what do you think about in Mozambique and this and that? Because they know that she's a buffoon. And they also know that look, we already got your part played, and she and what's so sad is she knows this.
That's the key.
That's the part. She knows this. Thomas Sowell, the intellectual. I've never heard nobody ask Thomas Sowell about anything, and not at least not in the last 20 years that I've been reviewing his stuff. Look, I mean, he only gets a platform when it's about black people. Candace only gets a platform when it's about black people. I mean, all of these other people come out, and it's the fastest way. Diamond and Silk, all of them.
Yep.
They all come out, and the only time they're paid. Fox don't bring nobody on their platform unless it's about putting down black people.
That is absolutely true.
And then what makes it so worse, they get some milquetoast weak so-called black liberal to get up there like a Juan, whatever that cat
Juan
name.
Williams.
Oh yeah,
my
they'll get
God.
somebody like Juan Williams who, you know, they just walk all over him.
Right.
And you know, and you know, he sits up there, come on, guys.
Come on, you know that's not true.
Come on, that's not true, guys. Come on. You know, oh, I'm so disgusted. Oh God. Oh, you know.
And then he starts whining, but that's not true. Oh my God.
Right.
I do want to address this comment because this is what Adolph Reed does. And I've interviewed Adolph Reed before. And remember when I interviewed him for the Real News Network? And when I tried to interview him again,
Right.
Look, okay, so Adolph Reed acknowledges that it was implemented, that the New Deal was implemented in racist ways because of the reality of racism at the time. No, that is inaccurate. That is a myth. The New Deal was not enacted in racist ways because of the reality of racism at the time. The New Deal was enacted in racist ways because, as we said, Franklin Delano Roosevelt made a deal with the racist governors, or rather with the racist senators, who refused to vote for the New Deal to pass it unless they could implement it any way they wanted to, which Roosevelt knew damn well was going to exclude Black people. That is the reality of the situation. It wasn't like Roosevelt got this bill passed and said, oh, I'm so surprised that all of these states excluded Black. He knew damn well it was going to happen.
And I think
because that's a deal he made with the people he made.
And I think what's often overlooked when people when you know, people bring that up about what you know, we just talked about, is that Roosevelt consciously excluded Blacks out of the Social Security Act.
Now,
you know what I mean? So you know, so this was all part of this New Deal. We don't look at Social Security. We don't look at the federal housing and all this other kind of stuff as being part of the New Deal, but it actually was. And the reason why I say it actually was is because America, it was to deal with the crippling effects of the Depression. So you had different components that went into transforming this society. This is where the so-called the social safety net come from. Blacks were excluded from that. Unemployment insurance. Black people were excluded from that intentionally. So yes, this is a myth that, you know, oh, it wasn't racist. It damn sure was racist.
And you know how people respond to the issue about Social Security? They always say, well, no, Black people really weren't excluded from Social Security. It was that domestic workers were included from Social Security.
I think you know what I think it boils down to, and I think this is the problem we have, that we debate about how many angels on the head of a fucking pin.
There you go. And we don't look at what's right in front of our eyes. We've been telling ourselves, oh, don't believe your eyes. Don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe that, you know, what you see happening to certain specific groups of people that come out of this legislation. This is what really happened. And we really got to stop doing. If you really want liberation, you got to stop trafficking in these lies of omission, these half-truths, and like you said, dancing on the head of a pin, arguments dancing on the head of a pin that these people keep having to not deal with the issue, the dual issue of racism and classism. They are inextricably tied. You can't talk about class in this country and not talk about race. And you can't talk about race in this country and not talk about class. Exactly. And I hope that we're giving you an example of that. Because what you just said about mostly a significant percentage of Black people being excluded from Social Security and from Black people weren't even getting welfare benefits for a long time in this country. When welfare was introduced, it was first supposed to support Civil War widows, right? Well, no Black women. Come on. Then when it was expanded, it was used to keep families together. It was distributed mostly to farm families during the Depression, and they made a concerted effort to keep those families together. Why? Because like you said, white men were leaving their families in droves.
They were leaving their families in droves, and they excluded sharecroppers.
And they excluded
because after all, it wasn't your land; you were sharecropping. So there's all of these things, and I think I just put the comment up there, but one of our viewers stated about, the same compromise even under JFK.
Mhm.
The same compromise that we've seen under Bill Clinton with the mass incarceration. So I mean, look, we can look at these things in ways that we want to take the sting out of it, but trust me. Another thing that I think needs to be looked at when we talk about Black culture, because one of the things that people like Sowell and them talk about, and trust me, we're going to revisit this topic, because see, one of the things that the white media does is we have our own scholars and our own academics who have actually took these false narratives to task. C-SPAN won't get them.
No.
MSNBC won't have them on. The mainstream media won't get them. You know what I mean? So we're definitely going to have the Black Power media academic staff come on. I mean, like so we're going to revisit this again. But what I wanted to talk about is one of the things that the Sowells and them always want to talk about is music. Sowell actually, it wasn't in this clip, but he said in another video that gangster rap, and it's an old tired argument. We've heard this, but he said, let me put this in proper context. Again, cherry picking data. He said that there was a study done in Germany after World War II, where Black GIs who had fathered children with German women, and they stayed in Germany, and tests were done where those Black, German children scored the same on intelligent tests and all these other white supremacist European tests. That they scored, the same as the all white Germans, children, and all this stuff. And so the thing of it is, he says, so the difference is that, and this is what made me laugh. Well, what was the difference between the Black German kids and the Black American kids? Oh, there was no gangster rap.
He said that.
He actually said that. There was no gangster rap. There was no gangster rap in order to corrupt the culture. And so we're hearing this argument over and over again, with oh wow, this is why the kids are out here doing this and doing. So what I'm saying is that this type of subject requires revisiting, because when we talk about Black culture, first of all, what is Black culture?
Right.
And that's the thing I think that the Thomas Sowells and them don't, he said, oh, it has nothing to do with Africa. It's not rooted in Africa. It's redneck, it's Black redneck. Well, that even is Black rednecks, right? And he said that, oh no, it doesn't have anything to do with Africa. This is just Black people who just did not, there you go with the class issue. These are Black people who did not evolve past of their agricultural roots or agricultural slave roots from the South. This is basically what he's saying.
That's what he said. And the point that he, of course, omits about the Black children who grew up in Germany, he omits what Germany doesn't have as a society that the United States had that created the situation we're in today. Things like Jim Crow, things like lynching, but again, that slick, crafty lies of omission. And he just, in that space where he doesn't point out, he doesn't bring in the truth, the obvious, the actual facts, he plugs in this little piece of racist bullshit. Oh, it's hip hop. We listened to a song from, when was this song? Like 1933? Those people are having this big thing about, WAP is why Black girls are acting the way they do and why nobody respects Black and Hispanic girls or, Latinx girls, or this is why we don't know how to act and blah, blah, blah. I listened to a song from like 1933, I think it was. There was a woman singing about, she was singing about how she can do any man. She got a big old belly. She got a big old belly. She had a big old ass. She can do any man of any class.
Yeah,
and when
like
she said do, she didn't say do, she said,
right,
something else. That was in 1933. So please explain to me how many women were disrespected and didn't know how to act, and how many women were raped and people didn't know how to treat women because of that song in 1933 or 1913 or whenever it was published. We keep and I'm not saying that there's not valid critique to be made about some of the content that because we understand that we're not the ones who are controlling even our entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a certain narrative that comes from them.
Right.
From not the entertainers, from the people who control the entertainment. That's a valid critique.
Yes, Audra Walton, 1933.
Yeah, it was either 1933 or like 1930.
Yeah.
It was really...
It was in the 30s.
Yeah, it was really, really... Yeah. Come on now. Y'all act like these are the first generation of folks that were singing about their ass. I just don't understand. How did you think that?
Well, I mean, but I wanted to put those points you made in context.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to go back to the German kid example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the things, again, omission, right? And I think that you was highlighting that point is the fact that he said that these black GIs, right, fathered these kids after World War II, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's put it this way: Germany was destroyed in World War II, right? So it was in the process of being rebuilt. So it being in the process of rebuilt, these black German kids came up in basically a newly reconstructed society.
Right.
So much so that black men felt comfortable just impregnating German women and having kids by them, and the fact that these German kids did not have to deal, as you was getting ready to point out, did not have to deal with the structural racism that American black children had to deal with.
Right.
So that's number one. That, they didn't have that pressure. Number two, they were in a better economic situation, especially with the German fathers. I mean, the black American soldiers' father being there, just economically.
Right.
This was during the time of Germany being rebuilt. So that's a difference right there. The other difference with the music is, and I think that this is very important, is that when you look at the stats, right? Because everybody always talks about data. When you look at the stats, black children have not become any more corrupted by their music. And I'm talking about as far as behavior goes. In fact, drug use amongst black teens is lower than it is amongst white teens. Black teenage pregnancy rates have sort of leveled out. So the black birth rate has dropped. So what I'm saying is, WAP has not made a bunch of young girls go out there and just sling themselves and give themselves up.
No.
Snoop and smoking weed and all the other messages that's coming through hip hop hasn't caused a majority of our black youth to just go out there and do anything. We keep forgetting that these things are socioeconomic, has nothing to do with entertainment. And I think when we were talking about the video of what went wrong in Chicago, well, what went wrong in the music industry? I mean, we smart people. We remember sitting up here and having people who was part of the music industry spill the tea and say how it was a marketing decision to promote certain brands of hip hop as opposed to other brands of hip hop. So I mean, it's no different than the decisions that housing authorities made when it came to policy. It's all policies. So these are the fact of mission. This is not black culture. If any other group in this country were exploited like this, then I guess we'd be sitting up here talking about. I mean, I live in a Jewish neighborhood. I never heard a gunshot.
I mean, we raised the point earlier. You raised the point earlier that listen, back in the day when we were kids, there wasn't a proliferation of guns in our neighborhood.
Exactly.
Now all of us, I mean, by the time I went to high school, when I was in elementary school, I didn't know anybody who had a gun. By the time I went to high school, by the time crack hit, I knew where. And I wasn't even in the game, but I knew where I could get one. So that is the difference. But again, we're talking about culture, the culture of white supremacy that created these policies, that created situations among poor black and brown neighborhoods where the policies pushed fathers out of homes, where men were devalued to the point where they had to hide to keep from having their families penalized because they were there.
In the land of the home and the free, right?
Right. And you had the same system that was supposed to be, looking out for the family, creating a financial incentive for the father to not be there, claiming, oh, well, we'll find a place for the men to live. Like I said before, I don't remember seeing any neighborhood where a bunch of brothers were just living, hanging out all by themselves.
Not at all.
So I really want to know where all those men went who were pushed out of those homes, if we understand that happened at the same time manufacturing jobs left the city. Men didn't have a place to live and they didn't have a job to go to. What happened to them? Where did they go? And then
I can tell you where they went.
Where they go?
There's a very good documentary on YouTube right now, right? Called Bowery, the Bowery. And you had a lot of, the Bowery is a section in New York that was known for flop houses and and a lot of those places like that. And in most major cities, you had areas like in Philly and places like that where these areas started to formulate. And and it was places where a lot of rooming houses.
Right.
I mean, my Uncle Russell, and I'm saying Uncle Russell like y'all know him, but I had an uncle who was one of those men who lived in a rooming house. I mean, this is a weird story, but he was the only one that lived in the whole rooming house because somebody committed a mass murder there and he refused to leave.
Oh, is he the one who lived by himself in the building?
All these apartments was empty. He took me with him. And I'm like, Uncle Russell, I said, how come, nobody's name? He said, well, somebody came in and killed everybody, but they want me to leave. But he said the rent too good. Yeah, so he wouldn't leave. But my point being is you had a lot of these places. You had a lot. Yeah, Skid Row. Thanks, Big Teal. Skid Row. So you had a lot of these areas where these men and women in a lot of cases found themselves because, let's face it, one of the things in that documentary that you showed was that when they destroyed these public housing, they didn't replace them.
That's right.
So that's a big thing. So they didn't replace them. It was supposed to be these mixed income places. We all heard about that. But what happened is that all it was that the housing authorities of these cities turned it over to private interests and these private developers. And so a whole lot of black families were displaced. Let's talk about how black families were displaced during infrastructure projects. Places like, I look, unfortunately, I'm afraid to say it, but one of my, I'm ashamed to say it, I should say, but one of my first jobs coming out of high school, a couple years out of high school, was working on Trump Tower. I mean, not Trump Tower, the casino in Atlantic City. Yeah, and I remember, doing when they were doing the infrastructure for the casinos at the time, and how they just forced black people out in Atlantic City. So I mean, so it was a lot of those things that was happening too at the time. So again, and thank you, Ricky. They no, it's not asked enough, but yet the narrative is put to us that these men were just no good men. They just left their families. They just abandoned their families. And how often have we seen a lot of these men, because of the stress that was put on them, turn to alcohol, turn to drugs, and those other things, and wind up just falling, as they say, through the cracks.
Exactly. And then you have that situation where, you're right. Who asked that? Yep. Who asked where all those men who were forced out of those homes went? And then you look at the way women and their families were treated. You put people, stack them on top of each other, 50 stories high, and the children are physically separated from their parents, where we come from a culture where everybody watched everybody's kids. We were community. So, you want to talk about, black people didn't want to let go of their redneck roots. No, with these housing projects and government housing developments, they actually contributed to the destruction of our so-called country redneck roots, because we couldn't watch and interact with our children the way we were used to.
Exactly.
Physically separated from our kids by 15 stories.
Yep.
You know, the kids are downstairs, you know, outside playing. They're
Mhm.
making up rules as they go along, and it's not their fault because mama is either at work or she's upstairs having to, you know, stay. Come on.
Exactly. Then you're dealing with, you know, these places where they didn't maintain elevators. Not, I mean, we all saw Good Times. You know, so that was sort of like what was going. I mean, of course, it was a light view of it, but I mean, even through the comedy of Good Times, you seen how tough it was, and how the Evans family was not only kept in poverty by poor wages that James could never earn, but by the politicians. Look at Alderman Davis,
exactly,
and the parts that he played in the Evans family, remaining where they were and threatening them if they didn't do the political things that he wanted them to do.
Exactly. But when we were watching Good Times back in the day, we didn't understand that the Evans family was actually the exception rather than the rule. The exception meaning that in most of the families in the buildings where they lived, in the neighborhood where they lived, James Evans was the exception, being in the home,
being in the house, right?
And the only reason he was the exception is because they were not on public assistance, because he was a veteran and he worked, and he still was too poor to get any better than living in public housing. Come on, y'all. We running out of time.
Yeah, we're running out of time, man. But let's look at some of the comments here.
Yes, we do want to go back up here and thank very much. Let me go up. Here we go. Yep. We couldn't catch the first one. But we do want to thank y'all for putting 5 on it. We appreciate you. We absolutely appreciate you. Let's see what else we got here.
Oh yeah, and I wanted to answer Big Till's comment about Atlantic City.
Okay.
Yes, Atlantic City was majority black at one time.
Where is that one?
No, I mean,
it was a little bit further. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm from New Jersey, so yeah, Atlantic City had a very large black population, and so when the casinos came, a lot of black people, and it still has a sizable black community now, but nowhere that it did before the casinos came.
Yeah. I mean, this is. I think these are questions that you know, we just don't think to ask when we're inundated with this horrible history of what was done to us. Ms. Danger said the freeways plowed through communities as well. You mentioned that, how, you know, interstate highways being built just completely knocked communities, destroyed them to build a highway.
Exactly.
And didn't replace anything.
Nothing.
You know, nothing.
No. But you know what? But what happened was, and the developers just sat on that land waiting for gentrification. And that's what. And now they turned the faucet on. And now that's what we're seeing now. All of that land that these developers are building in DC and stuff, what we see, that was all supposed to be land that was supposed. Look at Barry Farm. All of that was supposed to be the so-called replacement housing. But what did they do? Y'all know what they did.
Yep. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up Barry Farms, because there's only 2 buildings of that. That was public housing. That was a public housing development here in DC. There are only 2 buildings left. They knocked everything else down. And the same things that the Thomas Sowells and the Candace Owens are still saying about black folks. Everything that happened in Chicago that we showed you in that little clip of the documentary happened in Barry Farms.
Yep.
But people, they never talk about these things that we talked about tonight, but that's why we talked about it tonight. So yeah, they are still trying to clear out whatever public housing is left, and they don't really care where poor people go. They don't really care, and they don't care that most of those people are black and Latinx. They don't care. So that's why this is a class and a race issue, because there are a whole lot of middle class black and brown folks who are also saying, yes, get rid of that riffraff over there because they're poor. We're not like them. So,
I mean, like I said, we're going to come back and revisit these things. But right now, we got to get out of here because Dr. CBS is coming up. And I know y'all want to do what y'all got to do, get your snacks and stuff and get ready for the last dope intellectual. But we thank you for hanging out with us again. Just a reminder, get those likes up. We had 107 people hang out with us. So y'all should be, it's 94 likes. Get those likes up, subscribe, join, become a patron. Thank you to the members. our members and our patrons and all of those who continue to support Black Power Media. And as well, I like the way you say it.
You like the way I say it?
Yeah.
Well, as the eternal chairman, Fred Hampton, likes to say, peace if you're willing to fight for it, because we got to fight for it.
Man, join me tomorrow. Waters of Healing.
Yes. All right. Peace, y'all.
I had them on line before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them on line before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I know the wall's closing in, but don't you dare give up now. Poe believed in me, pull up through some bucks down. Todd told the valet pull the truck round. Push the line after we drew it, it's just us now. Would you believe me if I told you my granny told me she prayed this? Then booked the surgery just to pull me out of the basement. Right back where I started, nothing to show for a facelift. Got pushed playing Walter White and Davis, never felt so dangerous. The type of power they can't quantify. And name the best from my region, you gotta utter mine. Think of who really putting on, you never come to mind. Rapping like your Spotify, tap you rappers compromise. Yeah, no need to panic, just paint the canvas. If you can feel the static, if too close, find your balance. Embed the revolution for they prohibition bandwidth. Blood trickle from the lead to see what's planted. I had them all line before I dial up.